Imagine a reality where the United States and Russia are not enemies, but allies. This is a world where the two superpowers cooperate rather than compete and share their resources, technologies, and goals. A land where the Cold War never happened and history took a very different course. What would that world be like? What would the consequences be for the rest of the countries and regions? Would it be a better or worse planet than ours? The United States and Russia, how is each currently doing, and why their rivalry? Most of us were born into a world where the United States and Russia have been feuding for quite some time, and that's because for over 70 years these two world powers have hated each other and throwing hints at each other like immature teenagers. Only these two teenagers have enough nuclear weaponry to wipe out the entire planet should the other make a bad joke they didn't like. Before exploring this new reality, let's understand how the protagonists of this video are currently doing. Let's start with United States. This is the United States, the most powerful country in all of America. A land that has always boasted of offering the American dream and a better lifestyle compared to most of its neighbors. And well, it's partly not a lie, or so this chart tells us. Of course, it's worth noting that not everything is perfect in the United States. In addition to offering a great quality of life and being a world power, it is also a rather unequal country. Healthcare is a trap that could put you into excessive debt, and it has a society with many problems in many aspects, and some of its areas are considerably violent. But at least the country has a fairly genuine constitutional democracy. U.S. interests have always been clear. It seeks to maintain its national security and protect its interests around the world, so it is common for them to get into conflicts where they were not called in search of terrorists in big quotes. It also seeks to promote its economic prosperity and ensure access to natural resources. This includes promoting free trade, foreign investment, and intellectual property protection. So it loves to make deals with other countries and allow entrepreneurs to keep their businesses. And finally, it seeks to promote its democratic and humanist values all over the world, which is a nicer way of saying that it likes to meddle in other people's affairs and propagate its culture. Now it's time to talk about Russia. Here we can see the imposing country known as Russia. A place known for things like its strong love for alcohol, a society made up of strong men who could destroy you with one hand, people who fight with bears, long winters, and the best vodka you can taste on the planet. To be honest, this is just the internet's impression of Russia, and we are not going to take it that seriously. So what is the reality of this country? Well, the quality of life in Russia is quite mixed. Large cities, such as Moscow and St. Petersburg, offer a high standard of living with good access to education, healthcare, and job opportunities. However, the rural areas of Russia have a lower standard of living, with higher poverty and unemployment rates. And yes, it is these more rural areas where Russians still hunt for their meals, and where they probably fight bears. Let's take the opportunity to look at this chart showing the difference in quality of life in various cities in Russia. It should be noted that the economy is also quite mixed because despite being a power and having some growth in recent years, the country is quite sanctioned and dependent on natural resources and external investments. As for politics, suffice it to say that the government has been accused of being authoritarian and restricting human rights, nothing new. As for the interests of this curious country, truth be told, they are very similar to those of the United States, so we can summarize it. They seek the same as their rival, only idealizing their own beliefs and goals and antagonizing each other in the process. With all this information clarified, it's time for the moment of truth. What is it like in a world where the USA and Russia are best friends? Time to dive into this world. What will it take for the United States and Russia to become allies? First of all, these powers would need to change their perception of each other. Currently, both sides see each other as potential threats, which makes cooperation difficult. It would take a change in attitude for them to see each other as potential partners. Whether the US decides to adopt some Russian ideals or Russia decides to do the same, in this world both countries suddenly agree with each other and now share efforts and resources. But this is not as simple as when the Soviet Union existed, where we could say something as simple as one has to leave capitalism's communism and thus join the other. No. Both countries have many problems to solve, such as the situation in Ukraine, NATO expansion, and missile control. In addition, the two powers would have to find common interests that would incentivize them to cooperate, either to help each other grow or to fight terrorists, which is very complicated, as both countries consider opposing groups as terrorists. In terms of specific measures, both countries would need the establishment of channels of communication and trust between the leaders of the two powers, cooperation in areas of mutual interest, such as trade, energy, and science, and support for trust-building efforts between the two nations. The moment of truth, the US and Russia are now allies. What does this new reality look like? In general, many believe that a world where the United States and Russia are allies would be a much safer and more prosperous place. This is based on the fact that both powers are the two leading military powers on the planet, and their cooperation could help solve some of the world's most pressing problems, such as climate change, terrorism, or poverty. For the most part, it is a belief that makes a lot of sense, because if instead of spending their resources and energy fighting and spying on each other, they would use it against common enemies and pool their research and resources, they would be unstoppable. However, it is better to see this possibility on a grayscale than with positivism. Because let's face it, if these powers will pool their nuclear arsenal or antagonize any country, do I have to explain it? Not to make them sound like a cartoon villain, but there would be no rivals, let alone if we also consider the possibility that Russia's and the USA's allies would continue to be allies of both in this hypothetical. China, Russia, the USA, both Koreas, and Japan, etc. on the same side? I know, the possibility sounds staggering, but the more you think about it, the more frightening it becomes. I mean, what would happen to anyone who would antagonize this alliance? Probably, there would be no match for them. Still, let's talk about some possible benefits this alliance would have. Reduced military tension. Cooperation between the two powers could help reduce military tension in Europe and Asia, which would reduce the risk of armed conflict and probably affect, for better or worse, the controversial conflicts we currently have. Promoting peace and stability. Cooperation between the two powers could help promote peace and stability around the world, creating a more favorable environment for economic and social development. Addressing global problems. Cooperation between the two powers could help address climate change, terrorism, and poverty. But of course, there are a couple of little things to keep in mind. First, climate change is a very complicated and for some experts even irreversible issue. Second, the terrorists designated by this alliance might not be terrorists, if you know what I mean. And lastly, poverty is always going to be a problem no matter how powerful a country or alliance is. This world in which Russia and the USA have become best friends forever has a lot of potential, there is no denying it. But the truth is that this alliance has so much potential that they could achieve more power than can be controlled. And if you want to know more stories and show your support, it only takes a couple of clicks. Subscribe to this channel. See you when it's time to explore another world.